You paid 58 grand for it 18 months ago. Drove it off the lot feeling pretty good about yourself. Then last week you got bored and you plugged your Rego into one of those instant offer sites, the ones that give you a number in 30 seconds, and the number that came back had a 3 at the front of it. Not because you thrashed it, not because you rolled it, you changed the oil on time, you kept the receipts, there's barely a scratch on the tray, and it's still worth about 20 grand less than you paid, and the thing hasn't even had its second birthday. That sting you feel right there, that's not you being unlucky. That's the used market telling you something the salesman never did. Because here's the part nobody wants to say out loud when you're standing in the showroom with a pen in your hand. A ute is only ever worth exactly what the next person will pay for it. Not what you paid, not what the sticker said. What some tradie or some family down the track is willing to hand over when it's 3 years old and sitting on a different dealer's lot. And in Australia right now, there is a whole row of utes where that next person has quietly said, no thanks, I'll pass. I want to walk you through 12 of them. And I'll be straight with you before we start, because the title says crashed, and crashed is a big dramatic word. A couple of these aren't bad trucks at all. One or two of them I'd happily own. But value isn't about whether the thing is good. Value is a popularity contest with a very specific judge, and these 12 lost it hard between 2025 and 2026. What's strange, and I'll get to this properly at the end, is that the used ute market overall actually got stronger over that stretch. Prices for the big names went up. So these didn't crash because the tide went out. They crashed while the tide was coming in, which is a much harder thing to do. And there's a reason for every one of them. Stay with me for the last three especially, because that's where you see who was really running the show. So let me show you what's actually going on here. Let me lay the foundation, because it's simple and it explains all 12. There are three ways a UT torches its own resale in this country. One, it gets superseded or orphaned. A brand new version lands, or the model gets dropped altogether, and suddenly yours is yesterday's truck that nobody's cross-shopping. Two, it was bought for a reason that had nothing to do with the truck. A tax break mostly, and when the tax break vanishes, the truck's just a truck again, and the used buyer never cared about it in the first place. And three, it's a badge the second-hand buyer doesn't trust yet. So they'll only take it at a discount so steep, it makes the original owner wince. Every ute on this list crashed through one of those three doors, and some of them walked through two at once. Keep that in your head. Right, let's count them. Number one, the original GWM Ute, the one they now call the Cannon. Cast your mind back to 2021, 2022. Great Wall lobbed a full-size dual cab into the market for well under 40 grand drive away, and a lot of people took the punt. Cheap, big, 7-year warranty, why not? Here's why not, at least for your wallet down the track. In 2024 and 2025, GWM replaced it with a genuinely much better Cannon, properly re-engineered, and they've been shifting them by the thousands. Which is great for the brand and terrible for anyone holding one of the early ones. Because now you're trying to sell a first attempt Chinese ute that the maker itself has effectively admitted wasn't good enough. Sitting next to a newer one that's sharper in every way and often barely costs more. The early Cannon didn't do anything wrong. It just got left behind by its own replacement, and the used market is merciless about that. Those first trucks are worth very little now, and the ones that had niggling quality complaints early on are worth even less. Number two, the Mahindra pickup. This one's almost gentle because it was never pretending to be flash. Mahindra sold this basic, tough, no-frills Indian workhorse in Australia for 16 years, and there's a certain kind of buyer, usually on a farm, who genuinely loved it for being simple and cheap to keep alive. But in 2025, it got the axe here, discontinued, with an all-new Mahindra ute lined up to take its place. And the second you discontinue something, you orphan everyone already on the road. No new stock in the showroom means no marketing, no fresh buzz, no reason for a used shopper to even think of it. An orphaned budget ute with a small dealer network is about as cold as resale gets. If you bought one near the end, you didn't buy an appreciating asset. You bought a very durable paperweight with a tow bar. Number three, the Photon Tunland. Now this one's different because it's the opposite problem. This is a brand new arrival, back in Australia in 2026 after being gone for the best part of a decade. And it comes in around 40 grand for a big US-sized dual cab, which on paper is a lot of metal for the money. And that's exactly the trap. When a badge has no track record here, when there's no history of what a 3-year-old one sells for. The first owner becomes the crash test dummy for depreciation. You're the one who finds out the hard way what the used market thinks it's worth. And the honest answer is nobody knows yet, which means the buyer down the line will assume the worst and offer accordingly. It sold a whisker under 100 units in its first proper month. That's not a knock on how it drives. It's just maths. Be the guinea pig on a new badge and you eat the drop nobody's measured yet. Number 4, the LDV T60. LDV has been here longer than most of the newcomers, so this isn't a mystery brand story, it's a plain demand story. The T60 has always been one of the cheapest ways into a dual cab, and it has always been one of the weakest at holding its value, retaining somewhere around half its price after 3 years, while the segment leaders hold 20 points more than that. And now it's on the way out, being replaced by a bigger, more serious LDV called the Terran. So you've got soft demand to begin with, and then a shinier replacement arriving to make the old one look older. Same trap as the early GWM. If you plan to keep an LDV T60 for a decade and run it into the ground, fine, the low buy-in price makes sense. But sell it at 3 years and you'll get a lesson in what cheap really costs. Number 5, the JX T9, another new Chinese Ute, another new badge, but this one gives you an actual number to hang on to, and it's a brutal one. The T9 landed with some fanfare, and then it just didn't sell. A few hundred units for the whole of 2026 so far. So what does a maker do when the metal isn't moving? They discount hard. Jack took the existing stock and knocked thousands off the drive-away price and started throwing in a $4,000 fuel card on top to get people through the door. Now think about what that does to the poor bloke who paid full retail 6 months earlier. His truck is now competing, brand new, against the exact same truck marked down by 4 or 5 grand with free fuel attached. His resale isn't set by what he paid. It's set by that new discounted price, minus the used car haircut on top. When the maker cuts the new price, the early owner is the one who bleeds, every single time. Number 6, the Volkswagen Amarok, and specifically the flagships. This one surprises people because Volkswagen is a proper premium badge, and the current Amarok is a genuinely lovely thing to drive, built right alongside the Ford Ranger and sharing most of its bones. But being nice to drive and being nice to own are 2 different accounts. On the industry's own forecasts, the top Amarok trims, the W Series and the Aventura, are tipped to hold only around 40 to 44% of their value over 5 years. The Ranger they're related to, built on the same line, is forecast at 65, 66. That is a staggering gap between 2 trucks that are mechanically cousins. And the previous generation V6 Amaroks, the ones that stick it up near 70 and 80 grand, have been the worst hit of the lot on the used market. This one didn't crash overnight. It's a slow, steady leak. But if you buy the fanciest Amarok, you are paying premium money for the weakest resale in the mainstream Ute pack, and the badge doesn't save you. Number 7, the Musso, the Ute from the brand that used to be called SsangYong. Here's a whole extra way to lose value that the others don't have. In the middle of 2025, the company retired the SsangYong name in Australia and rebranded the whole outfit to KGM. Now, the truck is the same, the dealers are the same, the warranty is the same, but go and try to sell a 3-year-old Ute wearing a brand name that technically no longer exists. The used buyer sees a badge they half remember from a company that's changed its identity, and their hand goes straight to their wallet to protect it. On top of that, this Musso is getting old. The design's been around the better part of 8 years, and there's an all-new one due to land late in 2026 to replace it. Old model, dead brand name, replacement on the doorstep. You can already see it in the classifieds. Top spec Mussos that cost anywhere from the high 40s up towards 60 grand new are turning up used with barely a couple of thousand kilometers on them, priced down in the high 30s. That's a truck losing a fifth or a quarter of its value while it still smells new. And here's the honest bit, because I try to be fair. The Musso is actually a decent, honest, capable truck. It just got caught holding 3 problems at once, and none of them were its fault. Number 8, the Nissan Navara, the old one, the outgoing generation. For years, this was a solid, popular, everywhere sort of Ute, and there's nothing wrong with a well-kept one. But by 2025, it was showing its age badly against fresher rivals, and everyone in the game knew a replacement was coming. Then in early 2026, the all-new Navara arrived. A completely different truck built on the Mitsubishi Triton's platform, with locally tuned suspension. And the moment that new one hit the showroom, the old one became a runout. Runout is a lovely word the industry uses that really means, we need this gone, name your price. Dealers were clearing the last of the old stock with heavy discounts and finance sweeteners, no repayments for months, that sort of thing. Every one of those discounted new runout trucks drags down the value of every used one already out there. And here's the kicker that makes it worse. The new Navara that replaced it, priced from around 53 grand up to 68, hasn't exactly set the world on fire either, selling well down on the year before. So the whole nameplate is in limbo. The old one being dumped and the new one struggling to build momentum, and nothing drains a used truck's value faster than a badge that feels unsure of itself. If you bought a last of the line old Navara at a decent chunk off, you did all right. If you paid near full price for one just before the new model landed, you copped it. Now, before the last four, I want to name the trucks that did the opposite because it matters and it proves the point. The Toyota Hilux, the Ford Ranger, the Isuzu D-Max. Those three held their value like champions right through this same stretch. 60-odd% retained after years of hard use, some of the strongest in the whole market. Boring, proven, everybody wants one second-hand parts on every corner. That's the whole trick. So when the next four crashed, they didn't crash because Australians went off Utes. They went the exact opposite way to the trucks people actually trust. Keep that in mind because it tells you what was really going on. Number 9, the Jeep Gladiator. This one's the closest thing to a genuine, dramatic, catastrophic crash on the list. And it's a shame because underneath it's a properly capable off-roader. But look at what happened. The Gladiator became the slowest selling ute in the entire country. In the first half of 2026, sales fell by more than half, down to double digits, while Jeep as a whole in this country slid to the very back of the pack, the brand genuinely fighting to survive here. And when a truck won't sell, the discounting gets desperate. There were temporary drive-away deals knocking as much as $25,000 off a Gladiator. 25 grand off one truck. Now imagine you paid full retail, somewhere north of 80 grand, and then watched them start dumping the same vehicle for 25 less to clear the floor. There's a practical flaw underneath it too. Most serious dual cabs will tow 3.5 tons. The Gladiator, with its 3.6-litre petrol V6, rather than the diesel most buyers here expect, tops out closer to 2.7 tons of towing, which for a lot of Aussie caravan and boat buyers rules it out entirely. And a petrol V6 in a heavy off-road ute means a thirsty drink at the Bowser, which the used buyer prices in too, ruthlessly. Even the flagship Rubicon, listing up near 83 grand, couldn't find enough takers. Great truck, tiny audience, fire sale pricing, wounded brand. That is a value crash in every sense of the word. Number 10, the GWM Cannon Alpha PHAV. And now we get to the plug-in hybrids, which are their own special story, and they all crashed for the same reason, so watch this pattern. The Cannon Alpha PHAV is a big, powerful plug-in dual cab, 300 kilowatts and 750 of torque, over 100 kilometers of electric range, tows the full 3.5 tons, genuinely impressive on paper, and a real answer to the Shark 6. It launched with real momentum in the low 60s drive away. And then two things happened to it. The tax rule that made plug-in utes attractive got switched off, and I'll explain that properly in a minute. And once the initial rush faded, GWM started discounting it hard. 5 grand off the drive away, cashback deals stacked on top. Same story as the JSE, but on a pricier truck. So the dollars are bigger. Anyone who bought one early, at full price, chasing the plug-in dream, is now sitting on a truck the maker is actively marking down, while the reason they bought it in the first place has quietly disappeared. The impressive spec sheet doesn't help you when the used buyer doesn't want the running costs of a plug-in they can no longer write off. Number 11, the Ford Ranger PHEV. And this is the cleanest example of the whole rort, so pay attention to the numbers. Ford brought a plug-in Ranger to Australia in late 2025 and priced it right up at around 72 grand, a big premium over the diesel. People bought them. Then, within a few short months, by early 2026, Ford was clearing them with drive-away pricing down around $62,000 plus a $4,000 fuel card thrown in. And then they went further, renamed the whole thing the Ranger Hybrid, reshuffled the range and cut prices again, hard. So did the arithmetic on the early buyer. You pay 72, within a year, the same truck near enough is going for 62 with free fuel and then less again under a new name. That's more than $10,000 of value gone before you've worn the tires out on a Ford, which is a brand that normally holds value beautifully. And for what, in the end? Around 50 kilometers of electric range on a full charge before it's back to burning petrol like any other ute. A nice feature, not a $10,000 one, and certainly not one the second owner will pay you back for. The regular diesel Ranger is one of the best value holders in the country. The plug-in version bought at launch was one of the worst. Same truck, same badge. The difference was the plug and the tax game around it. Number 12. And I'm ending on this one on purpose because it's the poster child, the golden boy, the one everybody held up as the future, the BYD Shark 6. This thing was a phenomenon. It came in sharp, high 50s to low 60s, depending on the grade, undercut everything with that kind of gear, and it became the best-selling plug-in ute in the country almost overnight. They were everywhere, on every second building site, and for a while it looked unstoppable. Here's the quiet problem. When you sell that many of something that fast, you create a wave of them, and 18 months to 2 years later, that wave washes up on the used market all at once. A flood of near-new Shark 6s hitting the second-hand lots at the same time. Supply through the roof. And at the same time, BYD held and trimmed the new price. The tax break that made it so appealing evaporated, and every rival, GWM, Ford, JSE, piled into the same plug-in space. So the early adopter who paid full price in the excitement of 2025 is now watching a used market drowning in the exact same truck, with the tax incentive gone and newer, cheaper alternatives everywhere. It drives well. It's clever. None of that stops a value slide when everyone bought one at once, and the reason they bought it has changed. The darling of the segment is quietly one of its worst value stories, and almost nobody saw it coming. So that's the 12. Now here's the part that actually matters, the part I told you to wait for. Look back at that list and notice the pattern, because it isn't random. 3 of the biggest crashes, the 2 GWM and Ford plug-ins, and the Shark 6, all fell off a cliff for the exact same reason. And it had almost nothing to do with the trucks. It was a tax rule. For a while, the government made electrified vehicles hugely attractive to buy through a business by waiving a tax called fringe benefits tax on them. Plug-in utes qualified, so a wave of people bought plug-in dual cabs, not because they'd fallen in love with the technology, but because the numbers on a salary package suddenly made sense. Then, in April of 2025, the rules changed and plug-in hybrids stopped qualifying. Only pure electric kept the exemption. The tax mirage lifted. And the second it did, all those plug-in utes were just expensive, complicated trucks that a used buyer now has to pay for with their own after-tax money, with no incentive attached. The value was never really in the truck. It was in a line of tax legislation, and you cannot sell a line of tax legislation to the next owner. It wasn't only that one rule either. Around the same window, the instant tax write-off that small businesses had leaned on to justify expensive utes got wound right back down to $20,000, well below the price of nearly any new dual cab, so that lever went soft too. And a new emissions standard started putting pressure on the big thirsty diesels. Layer it all together, and you had a market where a lot of the reasons people bought a particular truck were sitting in tax offices and regulations, not in the driveway. Move the paperwork, and the value moves with it, and the poor owner is the last to find out. That's the game, and it's worth understanding, because there's no villain in a black hat here, just a flow of money doing what money does. There's very little profit in selling you a boring diesel Hilux that holds its value for a decade and never needs the dealer. There is a great deal of profit in a churn, in a new badge landing every few months that needs discounting to sell, so the early buyer eats the drop and the maker moves the metal. In a tax setting that stampedes people into a certain kind of truck, then shifts and leaves them holding it. In selling the newest, most complex, most electrified thing as progress, when for you, the owner, the complexity often just means the truck is worth less sooner and harder to shift when you're done with it. The used market is the one honest voice in this whole business. It doesn't care about the marketing. It doesn't care about the tax break you got. It only tells you what people actually want in their own money with no incentive holding their hand. And right now it's telling you it wants the simple, proven, boring stuff, and it's deeply suspicious of everything else. And I think there's something worth holding on to in that. Because the Utes that crashed and the Utes that held tell you exactly what real value is. Real value is a thing so well made, so trusted, so easy to keep running, that a total stranger will hand over strong money for it, years after you've stopped caring about it. That's not a marketing achievement. That's an engineering one and a reputation earned over decades that can't be bought with a launch campaign or a tax loophole. The plug and the touchscreen and the badge from a company that's rebranded twice, all of that is froth. The thing that holds its worth is the thing that just works, that everyone understands, that any mechanic in any town can fix. We've somehow been talked into believing that newer and more complicated automatically means better and more valuable. The used car lot, which is the least sentimental place on earth, says the exact opposite. So here's what I want you to take away from all this, and it's simple. If resale matters to you at all, and for most people spending 50 or 60 grand it should, then buy the truck the next person will want, not the truck the salesman is pushing hardest this month. Be very, very careful of three things. Be careful of a plug-in or an electrified ute bought for tax reason, because tax reasons change and the truck's value goes with them. Be careful of a brand new badge with no resale history, because you become the one who finds out the hard way what it's worth. And be careful of buying anything right before its replacement lands, because runout is only a bargain if you're the one buying the discount, not the one who paid full price a month too early. Check what a 3-year-old version of your chosen ute actually sells for before you sign, not the shiny new price, the old used one. That number is the truth. Everything else is a story. Do that and picture where you'll be in a few years. Your neighbor, the one who chased the plug-in and the tax break and the newest badge, is staring at an instant offer number with a 3 at the front and wondering where his money went. And you're looking at a boring, proven, unglamorous ute that a stranger is happy to pay real money for. Because you understood the one rule that runs this entire market. It's never worth what you paid. It's only ever worth what the next person will pay. Buy accordingly. I want to hear from you on this one, because you lot always know things the spec sheets don't. Tell me in the comments what you drive, where in the country you are, and what your ute was actually worth when you went to sell or trade it versus what you paid. I especially want to hear from the tradies and the fleet buyers who've watched these numbers move in real time on their own vehicles, and from anyone who got burned or got lucky on a plug-in or a run-out deal. I read every single one of them, and honestly, those replies teach me more than any press release ever will. And they're the reason I keep making these. If this saved you from a mistake, or just made you look at that instant offer button a bit differently, do me a favor and subscribe, because the next one is a beauty. I'm going to pull apart the phrase that's costing owners a fortune without them even knowing. The one written right there in the handbook. Filled for life, sealed for the life of the vehicle. That transmission fluid you were told you never have to change. I'm going to show you whose life they actually mean, why it's in there, and what it quietly does to your gearbox and your bank account. Trust me, once you hear it, you'll never read those two words the same way again. Until then, do yourself the favor I always bang on about. Before you buy the newest, cleverest, most electrified thing on the lot, go and find out what the last one is worth secondhand. That single number will tell you more than the whole brochure. Look after your gear, and I'll see you next time.